Welcome to the Savage Executive Podcast. This is wisdom for the weight that you carry. I'm Steve Smith, and whether you're running a company, leading a department, or building your first team, this is where faith-driven leaders come to sharpen. Let's get into it. 3 months of silence. You might have wondered if the Savage Executive had run its course. Or maybe, like me, you've been in a season of recalibration. A season where you stepped back from the noise long enough to ask whether what you were building was actually worth building. I think a lot of leaders are in that place right now. You're doing the work. You're showing up every day. You're carrying the weight. But there's this quiet voice asking, is this the right work? Is this the right weight? Here's what I've learned in these 3 months. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is stop, step back, assess, and return with greater clarity than when you left. Silence wasn't the absence of a strategy. Silence was the strategy. So welcome back. And if you are new to the podcast, we're thrilled that you are here. Welcome to Season 2 of the Savage Executive Podcast. Today, I'd like to share with you 3 things: why I took a break, what's different now, and what you can expect from this next season. Let me share what prompted this pause, and more importantly, why I think the lesson behind it might be the most valuable thing that I give you today. As leaders, we fall into a trap. I call it the activity over alignment trap. We keep producing, we keep moving, we keep grinding, we check the boxes, we hit the deadlines, we show up at meetings, and somewhere along the way, we stop asking the most important question. Is this actually serving the mission? Think about that for a second. How many things are on your calendar this week that you do because you've always done them? Not because they're effective, not because they're strategic, but because stopping them feels riskier than continuing them. That was me with this podcast. For me, this podcast was becoming one more thing on the list. Bi-weekly episodes squeezed in between running operations for a 160-person organization, launching new business ventures, and trying to maintain some semblance of a family life. I was recording episodes on topics that sounded good, releasing them on a schedule that I'd committed to, checking the box that said, podcast done, and moving on to the next thing. But the truth is, I was doing the podcast because I was supposed to, not because it was something that I was actually passionate about. And if I'm being that honest about my own life, let me ask you, what are you doing now that falls into that same category? What's on your plate because it's always been there, not because it's still earning its place? So I asked myself a question. It's the same question I encourage every leader I work with to ask when they feel overwhelmed, whether they're running a company, managing a department, or leading a team of 5. What would happen if I stopped doing this for the next 90 days? Not forever, not dramatically, just paused it. 90 days. What would I learn? What would break? What wouldn't? That question is terrifying for most leaders because we're wired to believe that stopping anything means falling behind. That is, that if we're not producing, we're losing. That rest is the same as regression. But that's a lie. And I say that from experience. For me, the answer was revealing. The podcast wasn't broken. My approach to it was. I was creating content without a clear connection to the outcomes that I wanted. Episodes that sounded fine, topics that were interesting, but nothing that built toward something bigger. Nothing that moved someone from listener to leader who takes action. I was checking a box, and you deserve more than a checked box. So here's what I did with those 90 days. I didn't just rest, I recalibrated. I looked at who's actually listening. I studied what problems you're facing. I mapped this podcast against my larger mission, which is to equip leaders at every level with biblical wisdom and operational excellence. And I rebuilt the content strategy from the ground up. Season 2 is different. And let me tell you exactly how. Every episode that you hear from me going forward has been designed with intention, not randomly chosen topics, not whatever I felt like talking about on a given week. Intentional content built around 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is financial clarity, because I've watched too many intelligent leaders make costly decisions because they didn't truly know their numbers. We're going to talk about cash flow, stress testing, forecasting, and what it actually looks like to steward finances with confidence. Pillar 2, operational excellence, systems, processes, team structure, the infrastructure that determines whether that what you lead scales or stalls, whether that's a whole company or a single department. We'll talk about finding bottlenecks, building teams that run without you, and creating margins so you can lead instead of just manage. Pillar 3 is leadership wisdom, the decisions, the weight, the character it takes to lead well when nobody's watching, decision velocity, leading through isolation, the practices that separate leaders who endure from leaders who burn out. And pillar number 4, biblical integration, not forced, not preachy, just the timeless wisdom of Scripture applied to the real-world decisions that faith-driven leaders like you and me face every single day. Stewardship frameworks, proverbs applied to profit, the kind of wisdom that's outlasted every business trend for 3,000 years. These 4 pillars are directly connected to the challenges that I see faith-driven leaders wrestling with every day. Whether you're a CEO, an executive director, a department head, or an emerging leader who knows they're being called to carry more, the weight is real at every level. The ones keeping you up at night, the ones your team doesn't know about, the ones that make you wonder whether anyone else understands what you're carrying. That's what Season 2 delivers. Practical frameworks that you can implement this week. Stories from my own experience running complex operations, and biblical wisdom that actually applies to leadership. Not in a theoretical, seminary lecture kind of a way, but in a Monday morning sitting across from the desk from a hard decision kind of a way. Whether that desk is in a corner office or a shared workspace. One more change. We're going weekly now. Season 1 was bi-weekly, and frankly, it was hard to build momentum that way. You'd listen to an episode, start thinking about it, and by the time the next one dropped, you'd moved on. Season 2 drops every Tuesday, every single week, because consistency builds trust, and trust is the foundation of everything that we do as leaders. So if you're going to give me your time, and I don't take that lightly, I'm going to earn it. Every Tuesday, that's my commitment to you. Some of you know pieces of my story. Let me fill in a few details because I think it matters. Context builds trust, and I want you to understand who's behind this microphone. I've spent 26 years in business, 15 of those in sales leadership, the last 11 in operations in a complex ministry, running the day-to-day of an organization with 160 employees, over 250 volunteers, multiple P&Ls, and even a commercial real estate portfolio. Over a decade ago, I stepped into an operations leadership role during one of the most difficult financial seasons that organization had ever faced. The challenges were real, the kind that test every system, every relationship, and every leader in the building. I want to be clear about something. It wasn't somebody's failure because organizations go through seasons. Markets shift, revenue changes, leadership transitions often create gaps. That's the nature of it. Every business, every ministry, every organization hits these inflection points. But what I walked into required building financial discipline from the ground up, new forecasting models, new accountability structures, hard conversations about priorities and stewardship, the kind of conversation, frankly, nobody wants to have, but everybody needs somebody to initiate. And I'll tell you something, those early conversations were the hardest. Sitting across the table from good people and saying, we can't keep doing this the way we've been doing it. That takes courage, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind where you know you're going to be unpopular for a season because the right decision isn't the comfortable one. But over the years since, we built something sustainable, consistent financial health, systems that actually scale, a culture of stewardship that doesn't live in a mission statement on a wall. It runs through every department, every budget, every decision. And it's not just the financial turnaround, it's the team that we've built, the leaders that we've developed, the systems that now run, whether I'm in the building or not. That's the real win, not the numbers, the capacity. But here's the part I want you to hear. I'm still here. I'm not telling you what I did 10 years ago from a beach somewhere. I'm not a retired executive writing books about the glory days. I'm still in it every day, still managing budgets, still leading teams, still having those difficult conversations that come with the territory. Last week, I was in a budget review meeting. This week, I'm working through a staffing decision. Next week, I'll be forecasting for the next quarter. The work doesn't stop, and neither does the learning. I share this because I want you to know something about this podcast and about me. What I bring to the microphone isn't theory from a textbook. It's not advice from someone who used to lead and now just talks about leading. I'm a practitioner. I'm still in the arena. And the frameworks that I share here, they're the same ones that I'm applying right now, this week, in real operations with real stakes, with real people, depending on the outcome. That's the difference. And that's what I think makes this podcast worth your time. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, you probably know the passage. It's one of the most quoted in Scripture. And there's a reason for that. It speaks to something that every leader feels. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to be silent and a time to speak. We live in a culture that doesn't value silence, especially in leadership. We're supposed to always have an answer, always be visible, always be producing, posting, performing. If you're not making noise, people assume that you've quit. But Solomon, the wisest and wealthiest leader who ever lived, says there's a time to be silent. And if there's a time for it, that means silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. These past 3 months were my time to be silent, to assess, to recalibrate, to make sure that what comes next from this microphone is actually worth your time. Not just content for content's sake, not just a checkbox to prove that I'm still out here. Now is the time to speak again, but this time with greater purpose, with greater clarity, with a deeper understanding of what you actually need from me. And here's what I want to say to you directly. Wherever you are right now in your journey, whether you're in a growth mode or a crisis mode, whether you're building something new or rebuilding something that fell apart, whether you're confident or quietly terrified, I've been in all of those places, sometimes in the same week. And I want this podcast to meet you there. Not with easy answers, not with motivational cliches, not with 5 hacks to scale your business, but with wisdom for the weight that you carry. Because the weight is real. It's the decision your team doesn't know you're wrestling with. It's the financial reality that you haven't fully processed yet. It's the loneliness of carrying responsibility at any level, where people look to you for answers and nobody asks how you are doing. You shouldn't have to carry that alone. And on this podcast, you won't. Let me give you a taste of what's ahead in the next few weeks so you know this isn't going to be vague inspiration. This is operational. Next week, episode 2, I'm walking you through what I call the 90-day financial clarity sprint. It's the exact framework that I use when I step into an organization to build financial visibility. 3 phases, 12 weeks, and by the end, you'll have a completely different relationship with the finances that you're responsible for. No accounting degree required. Whether you manage a $200,000 budget or a $20 million P&L, this framework works. After that, we're doing a bottleneck audit. How to find the one constraint that's slowing everything else down. Then decision velocity. How to make the right call faster without sacrificing quality. We'll cover the stewardship lens, a biblical framework for every significant business decision. How to build a team that runs without you. What happens when growth becomes your biggest threat. And by the end of the quarter, I'll share what I call the Savage Advantage, 5 specific practices that set exceptional leaders apart. Every episode, every Tuesday, practical, specific, and rooted in the kind of wisdom that doesn't expire. All right, here's your action item for this week, and I mean this week. Not someday, not when things slow down, this week. I want you to identify one area of your leadership, your team, your budget, your operations, whatever you're responsible for, that needs recalibration. Not fixing. There's a difference. Fixing implies that something's broken. Recalibrating means it's working, but maybe it's drifted. Maybe the approach that got you here isn't the one that gets you there. Maybe something that used to be essential is now just habitual. What's one thing that you've been doing on autopilot that deserves a fresh look? Maybe it's your weekly meeting cadence. Are those meetings actually producing decisions, or are they just filling a time slot? Maybe it's how you're managing cash flow. Are you looking at the right numbers or just the ones that are easy to find? Maybe it's a relationship with a key leader on your team that's gotten transactional when it used to be transformational. Or maybe it's this pattern of saying yes to everything because you're afraid of what happens if you say no. That's a big one. We'll address that in a future episode. For now, identify it, write it down, be specific. Not I need to be a better leader, but I need to recalibrate how I'm running my Tuesday team meetings. The more specific you are, the more useful the coming episodes will be to you. Hold on to what you write down, because over the coming weeks, we're going to address these things together, practically, specifically, with frameworks you can actually use the same week that you hear them. Before I go, can I ask you one thing? It's a simple thing. If today's episode served you, can you share it with one leader who needs it? That's how this community grows, one honest conversation at a time. And also subscribe wherever you listen. Leave a review if you're able. And if you want to go deeper, head to savageexecutive.com. I've got resources built for leaders like you. I'm Steve Smith, and this is The Savage Executive. I'll see you next Tuesday because Season 2 starts now.